My story is about how I almost lost my job, my name, and the people who still answered my calls. I'll start from the very beginning. The supermarket on the ridge looked awake and absent at the same time. No music, no cashiers, just the white hum of refrigeration and the buzz of lights that never sleep. I had come for a harmless quote about seasonal prices. I stayed because the receipt printer at lane 4 wouldn't stop. It chattered on its own, no items, no totals, just thin paper feeding line after line of zeros. At the bottom margin, someone had written 3 letters in pen slanted right, the confident hand you see on donation checks. The store smelled wrong for this hour, not cleaner, not coffee. Creosote and diesel, the mill's signature, like a handshake you can't scrub off. Hello? I tried. Nothing answered but ventilation. I ducked under the lane gate. The tape was warm. Every third line repeated a cluster that wasn't any brand I knew. I cover retail. UPC is a second language. This wasn't inventory. It looked like block and lot the county uses for parcels. A block number, a lot, and a checksum pretending to be tax. On the customer service counter, a carbon copy pad for temporary surcharge sat open to a press-through amount that rounded neatly to an insurance threshold. The math was moral more than legal, and this town likes math that behaves. I pocketed a length of the receipt and climbed to the office. The manager's door was ajar. Her badge, Maya, hung from the knob on a lanyard she never took off. Inside, the camera monitor looped a bright, harmless 30 seconds from earlier. No live time in the corner. Whoever set the loop knew retail IT and knew who would notice. Under a stapled Z-report, a yellow post-it read lot in that same right-leaning hand. Beside it, a note with a neat 7 that hooked back on the stem. A flourish I'd seen on oversized checks at school fundraisers. Elliot Crane always signed like the pen was keeping score. Back on the floor, end cap tags were flipped, blank side out. On the backs in grease pencil, 2 letters repeated, CL. I had photographed the same mark on a reefer trailer last winter when a load of baby formula expired on paper and vanished in life. Cornerlight Logistics, a name that never rented a storefront and always paid cash. At the doorway, I breathed the night the way you check a room for smoke. The ridge carried a diesel idol from somewhere you couldn't point to. I locked the glass because habit is a religion and fed the cluster into my phone's map. If I treated the middle digits as a block and the last as a lot, the pin fell 1 street behind the tire shop, at the fenced gravel yard where tow trucks nap and pallets learn to forget. I called Lieutenant Nora Hale because she hates my questions less than most. Empty store, fake surcharge pad, camera loop, I said, and a receipt printing parcel numbers. Or a prank, she said. Smells like the mill, I said. And Maya's badge is here. Silence, then movement in her voice. Don't touch anything else, I'm 5 minutes out. I touched air. On my way out, I checked the paper edge. A faint smear of black grit lived there, creosote, the same stuff under your nails after you shake Elliot Crane's hand at a ribbon cutting. The printer slowed, then stopped. That scared me more than the noise. Messages end when senders can't, or when someone decides they shouldn't. I stepped into the cold and let the mountain night take inventory. Mill stacks, the rail spur, the single stoplight thinking about yellow. The taped strip in my pocket crackled like a fuse. I told myself I was just following a receipt. The truth was simpler and worse. I was following a signature. The gravel behind the tire shop held onto the day's heat like a bad habit. Chain link fencing, a padlock polished by cold hands, tow trucks asleep in crooked rows. The mill's creosote rode the air even here, thin and sticky. I followed the pin from the receipt until my phone's dot sat on a patch of crushed granite bleached pale by headlights. Nora Hale rolled in with 1 unit and a look that belonged to deadlines, not me. You called a lot of favors, she said. I called 1, I said, and pointed at the ground. The first thing I saw was a loop of pallet wrap snagged on chain link, stretched thin as onion skin and freckled with black grit. The second was a strip of dock seal, the foam gasket you crush when you back a trailer into a bay. There was no bay here. The tow yard worked cars, not freight, unless freight borrowed the dark. Somebody kissed a trailer where a trailer doesn't belong, I said. Nora knelt, eyes ahead, hands off. Or haul junk in. Stay generous. Generous didn't explain the comb in the drainage rut. Tortoiseshell plastic, hair teeth snapped out of one corner, initials burned into the spine with a soldering pen. Mr. Maya Ruiz. I'd watched her tuck that exact comb behind her ear on a dozen late shifts. I didn't touch it. Nora didn't either. She called it in and built paper around a small thing that mattered. When CSU bagged it, the night felt shorter and colder, like the mountain had exhaled through us. What else? She said. Smell, I answered. Not rot, I would have named it. Not bleach, too clean a lie. Cold diesel with a top note of pennies and pine. Reefers do that, metal and fake forest, the scent of air freshener losing patience. Somewhere beyond the tow trucks, a semi coughed, then went quiet. We panned our phone lights along the fence line. A section of mesh bowed inward, not cut, just persuaded. On the gravel inside, twin tracks scalloped the pebbles into a shallow trench, dolly wheels or a narrow pallet jack. The trail ended at the back corner where a plywood panel leaned against the fence like a shrugged apology. Behind it, a rectangle of earth tamped tighter than the rest, chalked with the faint curve of a tire, and a drip lined the color of watered coffee. Nora crouched again, closed her eyes, and inhaled once. Condenser sweat, she said. Warm unit sat here and idled. I took out the receipt strip and laid it across my palm. Creosote dust glittered in the phone light. The zeros ran like water, but the lotted cluster sat bold and smug, as if happy to be proven. Who knew you'd come? Nora asked. Whoever wrote lot on a post-it and looped the store's cameras, I said. Whoever signs donation checks with a 7 that hooks back on itself. She looked at me with the kind of patience that passes for warning. We're not trying the man in the gravel. Not tonight, I said. But his shadow showed up early. We canvassed quietly. The night attendant at the shop smoked in the doorway and volunteered nothing but weather. Across the alley, a window brightened, then dimmed. This town tracks uniforms. On the far side of the fence, a single zip tie lay half buried, cinched and cut clean. The kind shops use to tag seals after someone breaks them for a return. Receipt? Nora asked, as if the word itself might confess. Codes print until someone hits cancel, I said. The printer stopped when I found the office. Either the sender ran out of tape or hands. We walked the perimeter one more time and found what I was afraid we'd find. Shoe scuffs near the tamped rectangle, not drag marks, not panic, just 2 half moons pointing toward the street. Small feet, compressed to the inside edge like someone stood on tiptoe to look over. Could be anyone, Nora said. Could be Maya, I said, and hated that my voice chose her. She tapped the comb bag with the back of a finger and didn't argue. At the gate, the padlock wore a fresh smear of graphite. Someone who cared about hinges also cared about keys. The cut of the chain looked old. The ease of the swing looked recent. The shop kept its world tidy. Someone else walked through tidy like it belonged to him. What's your next address? Nora asked. Block 221, Lot 7, I said, reading the next cluster. Old ski base. Take the road, she said. I'll take the paper. On the way to the car, a moth ricocheted off the lot light and vanished into the dark like it had been pulled. The mountain makes you poetic when you're tired. I wrote the line down later and crossed it out. The fact that mattered was simpler. The tow yard held a comb with initials, pallet wrap with grit, condenser sweat where a trailer idled, and the smell of cold diesel. Paper liked those facts. As I pulled away, the tow trucks turned into silhouettes and the fence into an idea. The printer's strip in my pocket rustled once, a small animal of paper. I told myself I wanted a story. The truth was smaller and heavier. I wanted Maya to still be writing it. The old ski base sat above town like a rumor that wouldn't melt. A concrete pod, 2 roll-up doors, a ticket window boarded with OSB. The air carried cold diesel and the cedar suite of timbers that remembered winter crowds. Block 221, Lot 7, exactly where the second cluster on the receipt wanted me. A corner light tractor had been here recently. You could read it in the gravel. Broad ribs, then a tight pivot where a driver backed, straight, practiced, and kissed a door that hadn't seen legal freight in years. A faint rectangle of condenser sweat stained the slab. the size of a reefer's belly. Someone had taped a sheet to the roll-up with blue painter's tape. The wind chewed one corner, but the title held: Volunteer Day Cleanup with a clip art broom. The signature at the bottom hooked its 7 backward the way only one man in town signed. I photographed the curl of that number because habit is how you stay honest when your gut already knows. The side door was secured with a knob lock that believed in itself too much. I knocked, said my name, added from the paper, and waited. Feet shuffled. The door opened a polite inch. Vic Knight Stalker from the store blinked in the wedge of light like a deer learning algebra. Volunteer Day, I asked. This is storage, he said, eyes never landing. For what? I asked. Community stuff. Such as? I said. He considered bravery and chose compromise. Festival tents, chairs, pallet wrap, I said, and watched his jaw move. He let me into the threshold and no farther. Inside, the big room smelled like pine and pennies. Along the wall, folding chairs nested in municipal columns. Behind them, a row of pallets wore blank shrouds of wrap, edges crimped like a seamstress had opinions. The floor under one pallet was cleaner than clean, a chalk ring where a compressor had breathed, then been wheeled away. On the work table, a clipboard faced unweighted to be found. Vic didn't move to stop me. The top sheet read temperature check log, the kind suppliers leave with drops. Columns for time, set, return, initials. Every hour's line was filled with the same tidy hand, initials EC, block letters that wanted to be typed. The 7 in the dates curled back, owning space. If a driver really logged these, he never sweated or misspelled, and he stood in exactly the same spot every time. It read like theater. Whose initials? I asked. Event coordinator, Vic said too fast. Same person who signs donation checks, I asked. He swallowed. I don't read checks. You read debt, I said, because his eyes had that exhaust. And odds. You pick up volunteer shifts that pay cash because tables don't ask questions. He stared at the slab instead of me. I didn't hurt anybody. I didn't say you did, he deflated. They call it the milk run. Trailer comes up light, leaves lighter. We move expired to community storage and swap with pallets marked returns for paperwork. Then the trailer heads to the river road. If cops pull it, it's going to the dump. If no one cares, it meets a box truck and the product grows a new birthday, I said. He nodded small. I just wheel, I swear. Where's Maya? I asked. His mouth tried a lie and failed. She asked questions. Then she wrote numbers on the receipt printer and told me to keep it fed. I don't think she left the store on her own. I think someone with keys brought her here. Night the wind screamed. We heard a truck idle long. I saw a comb on the table. He glanced at my notepad and flinched. Tortoiseshell, initials. I've seen it, I said. It's in a bag now. He exhaled audibly. Good. I studied the clipboard again. The last line on the temperature check log rounded the return number to a neat 40 in a room that didn't have a running unit. The initial, EC, arched smug. On a second clipboard, a work order for structural cleanup listed a community fee funder with a familiar autograph. In the corner, a box of carbon copy pads for temporary surcharges waited for a festival that never needed them. Why here? I asked. Because the county still pays the snow plow on paper, Vic said. Nobody counts empty buildings if they have a fund. Who gives the fund? I asked. He didn't say the name. He didn't have to. I took out the receipt strip and laid it next to the EC initials so my camera could marry them forever. The gas heater coughed once, unlit. Wind worked the door seam and returned the smell of cold diesel. Vic shifted from foot to foot like a kid with a hall pass about to expire. What do you need? He asked. Time stamps, I said. When did the reefer back up? Who unlocked the side door? Who wrote lot on the post-it? And when do you think the next milk run happens? He picked at a torn cuticle until it bled, then stared at the dot like he'd surprised himself. Midnight tonight, he said. They moved it because you wrote about infant formula last winter. Now it's cleaning supplies and donations. Same driver, different labels. Name, he whispered it. It tasted like the mill. A gust thumped the roll-up and made the clipboards rattle. Vic startled, then squared himself to the door as if bravery were something you could borrow by the hour. "If I talk, my cousin loses his job at the planing line," he said. "If I don't, Maya loses more than a badge." "We keep your name off the paper," I said, "but I put the paper where it hurts: prosecutor, state insurance, county auditor." He nodded. It looked like surrender because it was. Outside, the mountain wind sharpened. Down in town, a siren borborumed and gave up. I stood with the receipt strip in one hand and a temperature log in the other and realized the worst part of honest work. "The facts don't care how tired you are." I called Nora. "Old ski base," I said. "We've got milk runs, a stage temp log in the same hand as the donation checks, and a midnight window." "Copy," she said. "I'll bring the paper that opens doors. And Nora," I added, "bring a county truck." "Why?" "Because the next part of the story wants a dock." The hotel on Main wore fairy lights and confidence. A banner over the entrance pitched "Community Fund Winter Drive." Inside, the ballroom smelled like pine garland and polite lies. Elliot Crane stood at the mic with a glass he didn't drink, thanking donors for keeping the valley warm. His 7 curled back on the pledge cards like a fishhook. Nora and I didn't belong in evening wear, so we didn't try. We came through service, past trays of sliders and a bus tub that smelled faintly of creosote. Someone's coat had leaned wrong. A hallway climbed toward mezzanine/offices. At the top, a locked door with a brass plate that said event coordinator. The lock believed in itself less than the one at the ski base. Nora's warrant lived in her pocket like a warm stone. She knocked twice, said her name, and slid the paper under the crack. A minute later, a manager's key solved the rest. The room above the ballroom was small and organized to a fault. A window looked down on donors clapping for themselves. Against the far wall, a farmhouse desk held 2 ledgers, a stapler that had seen a lifetime, and a receipt spike with curls of paper dying quietly. On the credenza, carbon copy pads for temporary surcharges and a craft box labeled Community Fee Archive. I opened the first ledger. Columns, parcel/amount/note/status. The hand was Crane's, upright, tidy, the 7 with the hook. Notes read like euphemisms trying to be policy. Arrears, arrange relief, transfer on default, deed in trust. The amounts rounded to thresholds and insurer loves. Nora paged the second book, vendor/service/amount. Every third line, corner light, cleaning supplies, expired returns, community storage. The pattern sang off-key once you'd heard the tune. In the drawer, a stack of checks sat on a blotter, all voided, all practice. Community fee disbursement in Crane's hand, payees blank, balances perfect. I held one up to the light. A pressed-through scrawl bled from the page below. The tail of the Y in Maya ghosted along the margin like a bruise. I photographed it, then the sheet beneath. A memo to EC in neat office hand. Manager resisting surcharge script. Consider reassignment. The post-it stuck to the monitor said lot in the same lane I'd chased since the store. Below it, a browser tab left open to the county parcel viewer. Zoom to block 221. The mouse sat over lot 7 like a habit. "Smell that?" Nora asked. I did. Cold diesel rising through floorboards timed with applause. The loading dock on the alley fed the hotel's heat oil, but this wasn't heat. This was idling, a trailer waiting, not delivering. On the side table, a comb lay on a glossy program tortoiseshell, a tooth missing. Not Maya's, different initials scratched into the spine. Espy, a clerk's name from the bakery I'd interviewed last spring. My stomach learned a new temperature. "Pattern extends," Nora said, reading my face instead of the plastic. She bagged it, then pointed at a smaller notebook, a reporter's pocket pad, green cover. Inside, 3 pages of handwriting drills, the same hand practicing the same 7 and the same phrases. Temporary surcharge, community fee validation, expired returns. As if a script needed an understudy. Applause swelled below. Crane's voice lifted into a story about his father and the winter of '89. How neighbors fed neighbors, how paperwork could be compassion. His compassion always rounded to a number. I thumbed through the community fee archive box. Carbon copies stuffed into rubber bands by quarter. edges dusty with the same black grit the tow yard wore. The earliest bundle had a different signature on the approvals, Town Clerk Marla Dent, and no hook on the 7. 3 months in, the hook appeared everywhere. Arson, Nora asked, not as a hope but as a category. Cover fire, I said. If the ski base goes up, logs and pads don't need to exist. Insurance pays clean. Community weeps. Elliot speaks, she nodded, eyes gone narrow. You publish tonight? Not yet, I said. We freeze money first, then write. If we go early, he buys the clock. On the desk, a delivery receipt peered from under the blotter. Cleaning agent by the drum, invoice stamped paid. The driver's scrawl matched the curves in the ski base temperature log, only rougher, as if one person had signed for both sides of a theater production. Nora leaned at the window. Crane shook hands in measured arcs. He kept his right palm out of pocket. He needed it for signatures. A volunteer snapped photos. His tie was the color of cedar heartwood. I knew because the smell was in the room. How do you want to play it? She said. Starve the fuel, I said. County auditor for the fee fund, state insurance for corner light, fire marshal for ski base. And I need 5 minutes with a mic. You'll get 30 seconds, she said. And if you say his name, I lose the room. I'll say numbers, I said. People believe those. Downstairs, a toast began. Above it, a generator in the alley coughed and smoothed, quiet, then steady. The hair on my arms did what hair does near electricity. I lifted my phone. Midnight was closer than it felt. Vic's window for the milk run had a sponsor and a soundtrack. Then the door handle twitched. We froze. The manager's key moved on the other side like it belonged. Nora's hand hovered over the warrant as if paper could pretend to be a badge louder than the one on her belt. I slid the community fee ledger back into the exact dust shadow it had worn and let the spike reclaim its paper curls. The door opened. A young woman in a black blazer stepped in, saw us, and didn't scream. She knew heavier trouble lived downstairs. Her name tag read Sierra. Her eyes read tired. You're not supposed to be in here, she said. We are, Nora said, showing the warrant. And so are you. Sierra looked at the ledger, then the program, then the comb now missing from where she'd seen it every day. Her face changed in 3 small ways that only mean one truth. He keeps keys for the ski base, she whispered. He keeps a spare drum in the alley. If the lights flicker after the toast, don't stand near the dock. What time? I asked. She checked a watch she wasn't wearing. Midnight, she said. He likes clean numbers. Below, the room laughed at a joke that hadn't aged yet. Above, we set 3 phones to ring people who measure risk for a living. And somewhere farther up the hill, a reefer cooled empty air and waited to be helpful. Midnight in the mountains doesn't arrive. It tightens. The ski base sat black against a colder black. Down in town, the hotel's fairy lights did their best impression of innocence. Up here, the wind hauled cedar through the seams and kept score. Nora parked the county truck nose out by the service door. Auditors on with the fund, she said. Insurance flagged corner light invoices statewide pending documentation. Starve the fuel, I said. Then the story writes itself. Stories don't write themselves, she said, and handed me a vest that made me feel both seen and replaceable. We killed headlights. The first sound was a reefer idle, smooth, metronomic, familiar now in a way I didn't like. The second was a generator cough from the far tree line, catching, smoothing. A third noise lived under both, shoes on concrete, measured, deliberate. I pressed my palm to the side door. Warm, not from sun, from people with keys. Inside, the room smelled like cold diesel, pine, and something sweet not sweet that pretends to be citrus when it's actually accelerant. The pallets lined the wall like obedient citizens. A new drum stood near the work table, wrapped in clear with a green stripe, cleaning agent by label, flammable by everything else. The manifest on top carried initials EC in the same tidy block hand. That 7 hooked back like it owned oxygen. Temperature log, Nora whispered. I pointed at the clipboard. Tonight's return rows were filled with perfect 40 from an engine that wasn't even here yet. Theater set before actors. We heard the roll-up begin its rattle. Nora stepped to the side of the coil and let the shadow pass over her. The door rose just above knee height, tires kissed the slab outside. A white box truck backed to the lip, no company name, no dot. The driver climbed down, cap low, gloves clean. He moved like mill work had taught him economy. 2 drums, he said to the dark. Then the chairs. Paper, Nora said, stepping into his light and into his plan. He froze, then remembered a voice. Event coordinator in the hotel signed the release, he recited. He held up a clipboard with carbon copies and the neatest block letters. EC again. One hand writing both sides of the play. Name? Nora asked. He tried a lie and chose a shorter one. He gave it. It tasted like the mill. I took a picture of the clipboard corner where his glove had smudged a line of black grit. Creosote lives even in rehearsals. A second silhouette hopped from the passenger side and went still. Vic. His eyes were wide and then not. He had expected some consequence and still met it like a person. He said donations, he offered to the air. Donations don't idle, I said. Nora lifted the manifest. This drum is solvent, not soap, she said. Where's the other? In the alley by the hotel, Vic said quietly. He keeps one spare for timing. The driver shifted, a small calculation showing in his shoulders. We can leave, he said. No harm. Harm arrived earlier, Nora said. Tonight we just stop it multiplying. Behind us, my phone buzzed itself brave. Editor, the screen said, my name for him and his for me. Midnight calls, moral edits, coffee that tasted like necessity. I let it ring out and then texted later. It buzzed again, then stopped, which was not like him. The roll-up door clanked higher. A draft licked the drum and painted the room with citrus, not citrus. On the work table, a folded pledge card listed Community Fund Winter Drive in Crane's hooked hand. The detail felt petty and exact. Arson disguised as philanthropy. Ledger using ledger as kindling. Nora keyed her mic low. Dispatch, warrant served. Hold fire units 2 blocks out, no lights. She looked at me. If we pull the spark and bag the paper, I can keep this from turning into a parade. We moved in a choreography the night taught. I photographed labels, seals, the manifest's EC shadow beneath the driver's shaky block letters. Nora cut the plastic with one clean box gutter draw. The drum under the wrap wasn't the product listed. The cap wore a paint pen hash, one I'd seen on drums outside the hotel alley. Swap at the ballroom, I said. Swap here, Nora corrected and stepped back. You're both done moving drums tonight. The driver lifted his hands. He wasn't paid enough for improvisation. Vic stared at the floor. Maya, he said, not to either of us. Alive when she printed and fed that receipt, I said. Where she is now depends on whether we tie this to someone who signs their own 7. Nora's phone vibrated on speaker. State insurance, hold confirmed. Auditor, freeze executed. Fire marshal, on site at Hotel Alley, drum seized. The room shifted. Systems that usually help schemes were momentarily ours. We heard an engine on the Ridge Road. Not the reefer, a smaller, tidy hum. The hotel manager's crossover rolled into the lot and stopped with its lights off. A woman stepped out in black blazer, Sierra, shoulders tight. He told me to say the generator died, she said. He wanted candles at the toast. Her eyes found the drum, then us. I don't want to be coached. You won't, Nora said. Sierra's gaze slid to the driver. He isn't the one who writes the checks, she said. He's the one who wants to keep his house. We're not here for houses, Nora said. We're here for paper and timers. My phone buzzed again. This time I picked up because ignoring it felt like choosing a version of the truth I couldn't afford. You're on site, my editor asked without hello. He didn't ask how I was or what I had. He asked like a man who knew the pages in my notebook and the angle of the roll-up door. Name him and you'll blow the case. Not naming him is how he wins time, I said, and he buys time wholesale. A pause quiet enough to hear my own certainty. We'll talk when you're safe, he said finally, and hung up on his own courage. The white box truck sat like a thought someone wished they hadn't had. Nora cuffed the driver with a steadiness that made the cuffs moral, not metal. Vic breathed like a person introduced to air again. Sierra stood with her hands in her pockets like she was holding something fragile. I bagged the pledge card with the hooked 7, the manifest, and a post-it from the desk that said "lot for no one's benefit but a prosecutor's." Outside, the knight did what knights do, kept secrets for anyone who bothered to ask nicely. We closed the roll up 2 feet and left it there, a note to anyone else who planned on easy. Down in town, the hotel band tried a waltz into blues and landed somewhere on purpose. Midnight passed. Nothing burned. Back at the county truck, Nora leaned on the door and watched the tree line like it could answer questions. "You going to print?" she asked. "After the fund is froze and the drums have owners," I said. "After someone with a badge says the word the town won't." "Which word is that?" she asked. "Fraud," I said. "The kind with handwriting." We didn't say his name. We didn't have to. The 7 wrote it for us. By dawn the ridge looked like it had forgiven us. It hadn't. I drove straight to the newsroom because the story needed a spine before anyone tried to bend it. The lights on 3rd floor were already on. My editor's door was half open, like a staged photograph of access. He was at the window, tie off, sleeves neat. "You look like you slept in a truck," he said. "I stood next to a drum that wanted to be a headline," I said, and dropped the pledge card, the manifest and Vic's temperature log on his desk. State insurance froze corner light. Auditor froze the community fee. Fire marshal grabbed the hotel drum. He paged the documents delicately, the way a careful man handles a hot pan. "We'll run process," he said. "No names until arraignment." "That buys him a day," I said. "A day is a truck and a match." He smiled the smile he saves for interns. "A day is how we don't get sued." I set down the receipt strip like a trump. Creosote dust flared in the morning light. The checkmark 7s, the hooked stem. Same hand on donation checks, temp logs, surcharge pads. We have initials EC signing both sides. Something small bent in his face and snapped back. "You're reaching." I pulled a folder from my bag I hadn't wanted to open. Speech drafts, the community fund, remarks he'd emailed me to clean up last winter, printed and annotated in blue. In the margin of a paragraph about neighbors and winters, a tidy correction. Change 7 right arrow hook. The same blue circled temporary surcharge, with the note brand this as relief. He didn't bother to deny. "You want this town to eat itself," he said. "I want it to survive winter. By taking deeds on technicalities and laundering theft through expired returns. By keeping jobs," he said almost gently. "By persuading a man who pays 1/3 of the tax base to underwrite heat so we don't run obits for children. That man writes both the bill and the condolence," I said. He let the window hold his eyes. "You're a reporter, not a crusader. You file at 5 p.m., we run a measured piece, we let the county work. Or you torch your byline and watch lawyers price your future." "My future is already priced," I said. He priced it for me. He exhaled like a teacher about to fail a student. "Who brought you the first receipt? Who slid the strange surcharge across your desk?" "I did. I wanted to see whether you could hold a wire without shaking the whole mountain loose. We talked to Crane, he trims, the town breathes. That's how you keep families intact." "You wanted to test loyalty," I said. "I wanted to test judgment," he corrected. "Names make enemies, enemies make funerals." The newsroom smelled like toner and sleep. On his credenza, a comb lay beside a stress ball, cheap plastic, a missing tooth. Not Maya's, not Sierra's. A 3rd set of initials scratched pale. I filed the detail because habit keeps hope honest. "Last chance," he said. "We run process only. We do not run Crane." "Then we run me," I said. "Byline on hold. Story to prosecutor and state first. Publish after. You won't work in this valley again. Then I'll tell it from the next one." He stared at me like the mountain had picked a side. "You have a family," he said. "Health insurance. A lease that requires a payroll letter from me." "Crane wrote the lease," I said. "He can keep it." The door frame darkened. Nora leaned there like a verdict. "I'm only here to collect copies," she said, stepping in, "but I heard enough." She slid a warrant across the desk, not for him, but for the archive we both knew he kept. Drafts, memos, emails that taught a town to call a tax a kindness. He laughed once without mirth. "You'll criminalize editing. We'll document coordination," Nora said. "And we'll let a jury decide whether that hook on the 7 is style or scheme." He put both hands on the desk so he had something to do besides choose. "I didn't take a dime," he said to me, "not to law. I kept lines open. I took calls, I kept winter smaller. You kept it quiet," I said. "Quiet is a shape money loves." He swallowed and the shape of the room changed. "Your feature slot is gone," he said. "Your desk too. HR at noon. Make it 9, I said, so I can file first. I walked my copies to Nora and watched Chain of Custody eat my comfort like a steady animal. Outside, the ridge looked new, same trees, different slope. My phone buzzed, unknown. I let it ring, then took it. A voice I knew from podiums, warm, measured, certain. "You've had your adventure," Crane said. "I'm sorry your editor mistook mentorship for a parachute. Come by the mill. We'll speak like neighbors." "We are not neighbors," I said. "That's the problem," he said. "You moved here for work. I am here because this town is work. If you print a name, the winter will be yours." "Then print it with me," I said, and hung up on my own hands because they were shaking and I didn't want to hear it. I sat in my car until the heater remembered heat. I typed a version of the story with no flourishes and 4 verbs: froze, seized, logged, matched. I sent it to prosecutor, state insurance, auditor, and Nora. I sent a shorter version to the paper with a note: "Publish if counsel clears. If not, I already did." My phone chimed in a chorus I didn't control. The mill whistle blew 8 a.m. like a habit. Down the hill, the hotel's fairy lights were still on, still cheerful, still wrong. I had lost a desk, a byline, and the person who used to answer my calls first. I hadn't lost the signature. It had attached itself to evidence. And evidence doesn't care who edits it. I filed at 9:02 and watched the send bar crawl like a winter sun. Prosecutor, state insurance, county auditor, Nora. The newsroom version went last with a note that said, "Run when counsel clears. If not, I already did." My editor didn't reply. HR did. I closed the email and the door at the same time. By noon, the Mill Road became a parade without a band. County cruisers, a state sedan, one quiet unmarked that delivered a warrant with no adjectives. At the hotel alley, the fire marshal rolled a drum into a truck under a blanket like a body that wasn't. At the ski base, CSU photographed clipboards, rap, and the chalk ring where the compressor had breath theater. The community fee account froze on a judge's order. The checks Crane hadn't signed curled on a spike and learned the word evidence. Crane didn't run. He adjusted his tie and walked out with a smile he'd rehearsed for storms. "I've always cooperated," he told a camera. The hook on his 7 flashed on a pledge card in the evidence bag behind him. It didn't make the evening news. Juries prefer surprise. The arrest affidavit didn't say villain. It said scheme to defraud, false filings, tampering with records, attempted cover fire. My name wasn't in it. My editor's was, as unindicted coordinator with a footnote shaped like mercy. He sent a text at 5:11. "You burned the bridge and crossed it anyway." I thumbed a reply and deleted it. Some edits are worth silence. Maya came home by paperwork, not rescue. The receipt tape and lot note gave her a path through statements with counsel present. She sat at her kitchen table and held a mug she didn't drink. "I kept feeding the printer until I heard tires," she said. "I didn't think anyone would read zeros." I told her zeros are what money hides in. I didn't say how long I'd spent writing them for other people. Vic took a plea that sounded like work, cooperation, restitution, probation with daylight hours. Sierra wrote a letter to the court that made a judge look at a calendar and cut a sentence the way you cut zip ties: clean, quick, no flourish. The tow yard repainted the fence and pretended not to remember combs. The paper ran my piece the next morning with my byline misspelled and a headline that hated verbs. I collected the last box from my desk and left my key card on a stack of old festival programs. On the way out, I passed the conference room and saw my editor alone, hands tented over a draft like a man praying to an old god. Crane's arraignment felt like a town meeting with better acoustics. His counsel used the words misunderstanding and philanthropy and winter in one sentence. Nora used ledgers and hooks and timers in another. The judge used bail and set a number that made cameras blink. After court, I walked the ridge to the store because habits don't retire, they go elsewhere. Lane 4's printer was quiet. Maya had taped a note to the housing that said service in cramped block letters. I bought coffee and left change I couldn't afford to part with. The cashier didn't need it. I did. At home, the lease sat on my table with its perfect 7 in the landlord's signature. I ran a fingertip over the hook like a splinter and called a number 2 valleys over. A woman answered and said she had room if I had work. I told her I had paper. I didn't get my job back. I kept my name. My family learned the price of both and paid in smaller dinners and a winter coat I didn't buy. That's the part they never put in training. Truth clears ledgers and opens tabs. A week later, on a shoulder of the interstate where the snowplows nap, I watched a white reefer nose into a turnout behind a church billboard. New county, same corner light logo ghosted under a coat of paint. Different driver. Same dock seals in the gravel, same condenser sweat haloing the slab. I took a photo and sent it to a supervisor whose number I'd earned. Got your parcel grid, she texted back. We'll check the lots. Good map. I folded the last receipt into my notebook and closed it on the crease. The mountain didn't forgive us. It didn't need to. It handed us weather and we named it evidence until it behaved. My story is about how I almost lost the things people use to keep you quiet. I started from the beginning. The ending is simple. The printer finally stopped. The tape in the drawer was clean. And when the wind leaned down from the ridge, it carried nothing. No diesel, no citrus, not citrus. Just pine and cold and the sound a town makes when it learns a new word and keeps using it. Fraud.